Great to be in the house of the Lord today, is it not? I'm dragging a little this morning. For the first time, well, not the first time since I left the Army, but one of the few times since I've left the Army, I actually got up at 04 or something. You know why they shoot people at dawn, right? No one really wants to live at that hour. My brother and I had a barbecue throwdown, and he cheated. Can you believe that? My own brother. Didn't trim the fat, he trimmed all the fat off. You know my motto, sauce is for cheaters. He sauced. And then once his meat hit 125, well, this has nothing to do with the sermon, by the way, so if you're wondering, no, this is free. He took it out of the smoker and put it into an oven. Thank you, brother. I'm looking at him like, anyhow, all righteous indignation aside, I still won. When he says he won, just remind him he cheated. I'm just going to drop the mic on that one. Exodus chapter 4. Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Has nothing to do with cheating. Boy, you're going to hear that one day as a sermon analogy when we get to a section about cheating people. Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Then Moses answered, "Behold, they will not believe me or listen to me or to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is in your hand?' He said, 'A staff.' He said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, 'Put out your hand and catch it by the tail.' So he put out his hand, and he caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. That they may believe the Lord God, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." And the Lord said to him again, "Put your hand inside your cloak." He put his hand inside his cloak, and he took it out, and behold, his hand was leprous, like snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back inside your cloak." And so he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. "If they will not believe you," God said, "or listen to the first sign, that they may believe that they may believe the latter sign. And if they will not believe even these two signs, listen to your voice. You shall take some water from the Nile, and you shall pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you take from the Nile shall become blood on the dry ground." Got some new glasses, so they gave me some bifocals, and so I was reading there, and I'm still learning to read with bifocals, so words may move around on the page. I know, it's sad, right? Getting old. It happens to the best of me. I'm teasing. Pick up here in Exodus chapter 4. Now, a lot of times we look over this passage, and I hear this, and I've heard this just at every stage of ministry. You'll hear people go, "Man, if God could just give me a sign. If God could just give me a sign, man, I would believe him, I'd follow what he said, I'd execute what he said because I'd just get a sign." And I guess at times we kind of take kind of a selective view on what signs are, because you can look at somebody and go, "Man, God's trying to get your attention." "Oh, no, not me. I'm not qualified. No." And you keep pointing it out until it's just so obvious. Here, Moses has one of the clearest signs you'll ever have. Let's remember where we are in this study. Moses is talking to a bush that talks back, on fire, yet not burning. For just a minute. I mean, that's as clear as it gets as far as signs go, I would think. Here I am, I'm speaking to the bush. Now, I like to talk to myself. Usually that's where I find the best insight. I'm teasing. For that, I talk to my wife. But I talk to myself. I don't expect myself, the nonverbal side, to answer back audibly. Moses is speaking to a bush. Now, inside the bush, we know that it is the presence of God. It is God that is there within the bush, and it's talking back. It's pretty evident that Moses is getting a very strong signal. Moses, you will go to Pharaoh. Everybody's like, man, I wish I could get an audible voice from the Lord. I would execute his command. No! You'll do just like Moses does. Remember what was the first excuse? Who am I? Now, it sounds very humble. Sounds very humble when he does it. Who am I, Lord, that I should go? You know who I am. I'm the guy that tried to do this in my own strength and messed it up. And, I'm now out here in Midian in the backside of the desert. I'm a nobody in the middle of nowhere doing a nothing job. Who am I? There's a death sentence on my head. And notice the Lord didn't go, darn, you're right, man. I can't use you. Well, Aaron's coming. I'll use him. No, it doesn't do that. He goes, come, you're going. And then Moses kind of brings up another thing. Said, whoa, who shall I say sent me? It's kind of hard to explain that I was talking to a burning bush and it talked back. They're going to think I'm drunk or high, one of the two. Well, you tell them, and God gives us the name that's a verb construct, which means I am the existing God. And so this is just some review. And so now Moses, instead of hearing all this and hearing what God has to say, Moses, instead of going, you're right, I'll execute your command. Notice what Moses does. But they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Now this is right after God has said, I will be with you. Go and tell them these things. Go and reassure them the covenant that I made for them in Genesis chapter 15, and that the time is now complete. Go and tell them these things, and go in my name. I've called you, I'm equipping you, I'm sending you. And Moses is like going, yeah, but they're not going to believe me. They're not going to believe me. Now, when we start making excuses, again, last week I started making the point, we begin not to question just whether or not the nature of God, but actually the veracity of the integrity of God. I want you to go and do something. Yeah, no, I don't think you're right. Who now makes the decisions for you, God or you? You are. I don't think you're right, God. I had a conversation like that when he called me to be when I was a machinist. I was happy being a machinist. It was a great job. I got paid well. I worked for a little job shop. And after a few more years there, I could have gone on and really worked for some really nice companies and made a lot of money. I was happy. I was able to buy firearms and give them a loving home. I had a boat. It was a John boat, but still, it floated. I had a new truck. I didn't have to share my money with 4 other people. I had it made. I enjoyed it. And he messed it up. That's what I said. Yeah, you messed this up. I got a sweet deal going on here. Yeah, I know. But I want you to be a minister. I need a sign. Okay. And there were multiple sign after multiple sign, to which I was able to plausibly explain away. See, that's kind of how we handle those things, right? Rarely does anyone ever look at the sign and execute and go, man, God's called me into doing this. No, we try to find the way to explain it away. Here Moses is on his 3rd excuse, and you would figure after his 3rd excuse, he would stop trying to explain it away, because this one is pretty cool. I mean, there are many a times I've wished I'd been in meetings where I could throw a stick on the ground and it become a snake so we could all just get out. I have been in meetings in the Army that have gone on for 3.5, 4 hours where nobody is saying anything. But you've got that one guy who says, you know what would be a great idea is? And everyone just looks in terror at him like, you know what would be a great idea? Shut up. You just need to stop. Throw a stick on the ground, snake whips out, that room will empty. Whew. Vacuum of everybody leaving that room, cause that room to collapse. This is cool. And still, we will see next week. Moses will go, but I got one more. Let's look at these signs. We'll have a little bit more discussion. They're not going to believe me. Moses, what's in your hand? When God asks you what you are possessing in your hand, it's not because he does not know. It's because something cool's about ready to happen that's going to really terrify you. What's in your hand? Well, it's a staff. Yeah, is it? Toss that dude on the ground. Now we know that it's not a garter snake. And we know it's not a coach whip snake. Because what was Moses' reaction? Moses didn't say, ah! What does the text say Moses did? Moses ran away from it. Kind of like, when my wife or my kids see a snake or a roach, usually there's this loud scream, and I usually come in with armament going, kill it! I'm trying to. It's on the floor! That? You're 10 times its size. Clearly, Moses is no city slicker. Moses has spent 40 years in the desert where snakes, scorpions, and all kind of other critters that creep and crawl along the ground are commonplace. The snake that hits the ground, the text never tells us what it is. I know, Cecil B. DeMille says it's a cobra in the Ten Commandments. Yeah, what does he know? Anyhow, he's from Hollywood. But we know it's a dangerous snake because Moses hauls the other direction. When I was in Iraq, we were stationed my last tour in Wasat province, and in this area they have a really cool snake. It's called the sawback viper. Most snakes are usually neurotoxin or hemotoxin. This little dude is both. And your life expectancy upon being bit is about 45 minutes. You know what the antidote for this dude is? It's not in the area where you need it. It's 45 minutes away in Baghdad by chopper flight. So if you get bit, it takes you about 10 minutes to get to the troop medical clinic. They got to call the medevac to bring the antidote down, and then someone's got to administer it. Have you done your timeline yet? We have exceeded 45 minutes. And so the advice they said is, look, if you get bit, just cross your arms like this, lay down on the ground and do this. That's a deadly snake. At nighttime, when those snakes were out, even in conditions where you're not really supposed to have flashlights on, you see guys doing this. Because they were going to go home regardless of whether or not that light did. That snake caused us a great deal of concern. There was a shoot-on-sight vermin where we were. You see it, you kill it, period. Shoot on sight. Moses is not playing with a little... What's that snake? You see it eating a rattlesnake? It's a blue... I don't know. Basically, it's a bull snake that's blue. And so there's a video on Facebook or YouTube where it eats a rattlesnake. It's not one of those. It's a snake of great concern. So that's going to cause physical harm. And we're going to see this snake come into example. Now, here's how people explain this snake away. Of course, you can take a snake and snap it really hard, and it'll straighten right up. For how long? Well, for a few seconds. You stun it for a few seconds. Somehow I don't see Moses confusing a stick on the ground with a snake, and every 10 minutes he's walking, he's snapping the snake to keep it stiff. But that's a great way of explaining away the miraculous part of this story. Well, yeah, clearly Moses, did not have a snake. And you kind of see this when Moses throws down the snake. I'm giving you a little bit of heads up for a couple weeks away. When he throws down the snake, and then the Pharaoh's men, they throw down the snake, and see, clearly it's the same thing. They can do the same thing. Well, notice what Moses' snake does. It eats all of Pharaoh's snake. But somehow there was a logical explanation for the miraculousness enough, because maybe Moses starved his stick snake. and it's just really, really, really hungry. Or it was a non-poisonous snake that liked to eat other snakes. There are all kinds of stories about how you rationalize that part of the miraculous away. And when you can do that, then you can miracularize the calling that God has, and you're justifying the excuse. Who am I? Who's sending me? Well, people won't listen to me. This is after 40 years after he kills the Egyptian. So God gives him another sign. He says, you showed this sign to the elders. Put your hand in your coat. Now, this is going to be really freaky if my hand comes out bright white. Pull it out. And his hand was white. And the text says leprosy. And if you look at it, there should be a footnote. Your Bible says more like skin diseases. Leprosy is kind of like a big, broad term. If you go to Leviticus chapter 13, there are multiple types of skin diseases that they kind of classify as leprosy. Now, when I hear the word, I remember the kid we used to sing at camp, leprosy. All my skin is falling off of me. What's that floating in my cup of tea? Oh my gosh, it's a part of me. I'm not the man I'm not the man I used to be since I contracted leprosy. See, when we hear the word leprosy, we think it's stuff falling off. This, nonetheless, regardless of what it is, it's enough to get your attention. And think about it. If you put your hand in your pocket and pulled it out, and you had some type of rare skin disease, and I can understand, I mean, you probably talk to some atheists today, and Moses had a sugar donut in his pocket, and reached in and pulled it out, and his hand turned, and when he went back in, he wiped it all off. It's just how you explain it. Or maybe it was lice or something. Who knows? You explain away the miraculous, you can explain away or give evidence for arguing against the call. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside the jacket, inside your cloak, and then took it out, and behold, his hand was leprous and like snow. And God said, put your hand back into the cloak. And so he put it back in, put his hand back inside his cloak. And when he had took it out, behold, it was restored to the flesh. They're not going to listen to me. Well, I'm going to give you these signs. You're going to use them. It's been 40 years since Moses kills the Egyptian and goes into Midian. If you look at the excuses, a lot of them, who am I? What's your name? They're not going to listen. One of the reasons behind Moses' statement they're not going to listen is, remember when he kills the Egyptian. The next day he goes and he sees two Jews fighting. And he says, you should not do so. And they said to him, yeah, that's good advice. I'll stop beating him up. Thanks for the advice. No, he says, who are you? Are you going to kill me too? Why should we listen to you? So he's got a good understanding for that. And he's trying to use that. And also look at the distance between the time Moses begins to enact, because Acts gives us the idea that Moses believed when he kills the Egyptian that this was what God wanted him to do, to be the next leader of the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so from the time of the initial call to the time where God comes back and says, this is when I want you to execute, has been 40 years. A lot of times we receive a calling upon our life, and God asks us to do something, but yet what happens is from flash to bang is a period of time. For sometimes you are called to do something and instantaneously you go. And sometimes you have to go and there's a process in which you go where there's a time period that elapses between when God calls you and the time God opens the door for you to go. And then you go. And what happens is usually when we do that lag period, we think that it was gas. I remember when I was called, like I said, I was a machinist. And you know what happened the next day? I got a call from 12 churches. No, that's not what happened the next day. The next day, I went back to work as a machinist and went going, are you sure? I like what I do. It took me about 4 years after I got my college education. And when I graduated, you know what happened the next day? I got a call from 12 churches. No, I didn't. I waited another couple of years, and I began to wonder if this is really what God wanted me to do, if I was really wasting my time, because I've spent some money and some time studying all this Bible stuff, and I'm not using it. Then I started working for an inner city ministry in Dallas, and I said, you've got to be out of your mind. Redneck, inner city. Those two go together like mayonnaise and peanut butter. I know people go, have you tried it? And not going to try it. That's just gross. I worked in the inner city, and it wasn't really until I got into the Army where I was actually involved, really, truly, in full-time ministry, actively engaged in a full-time ministry component. And then I got very comfortable. I liked it. And one of the great things about Stephanie and I is we can see the potential of the other one, and clearly she has better insight because for the longest time, I've been telling her she should be a teacher. You should be a teacher. You should be a teacher. No, I wouldn't be very good. No, you just want me to do it because you want me to work. No. And there's a component to that because I like to buy firearms, and they're expensive. And she, no. Well, then she got a job working as an aide here, and she liked it. She said, I'm really good at this. No. And then she went, and she's a teacher. She's excited. I got a garage full of stuff that's going to go into her room. I can't wait for it to go so I get the garage back. But she always found a way to explain away a calling I believe God put within her life that came later in life than for other folks. For years, when I was in the Army, and even while we were dating, she says, you need to go on and get your doctorate work. Nah. I'm not as smart as I thought you are. And she said, no, really, you really should be doing that. And she would tell me at times, she goes, I think your talents are being wasted in the Army. And I'm like going, quiet you. Get thee behind me, Satan. And she said, no. I think your talents are truly being wasted here in the Army because, they began to start putting some requirements upon chaplains that really weren't very fun, and I just ignored them anyway. And she says, you're going to get yourself in trouble, and you're wasting your time. I said, yeah, whatever. What do you know, woman? Quiet. Women should be quiet in church. It doesn't work. I don't know why you're doing it. And she's sitting right there. And she heard this morning, although it's not really quite the same. I'm sitting in another chaplain's office in Italy. He's the family life chaplain, and he and I are talking. He looks at me and he goes, what are you doing in the Army? I said, well, that's a dumb question. What are you doing in the Army? He said, no, seriously, what are you doing in the Army? I think your talents are being wasted in the Army. You ought to be in a pulpit every Sunday morning instead of wasting your time counting money. I'm like, amen to that, brother. I'm done counting this money. And he says, really, seriously, you think you ought to go on for PhD work? I said, don't ever make statements like this. Okay. When God releases me from the Army, I'll go on and work in a church and get my PhD. Well, about 2 years later, I got my release notification, and sure enough. But see, I couldn't see it, and she could tell me all about it, and she could tell me over and over and over, and it required someone else to verify that call that I believe God has placed upon my life. And here I am, and there you are, and there she is, and there she's going to work over there. You see how easy it was to rationalize all the signs being sent to me. All the signs being sent to her. All the signs being sent to you. Well, God's not calling me for full-time ministry. And here's the thing. We have a lot of pastors that really should be selling cars. We do. And honestly, I really wish pastors would police themselves. Because I know several that ought to be selling cars. And have told them. Not really much friends anymore. Don't ask me if the dress makes you look fat, folks. you will get the answer you do not desire. But notice how you can explain away a calling or justify a wrong calling by ignoring the signs that are given to you. For years, I told Stephanie, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. For years, she told me, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. Moses is looking at God going, you don't know what you're talking about. And even with the snake. Now, notice how he had Moses pick the snake up, because I find this interesting. How do you pick up a snake? For those of you brave enough to do so. I'll be honest with you. Where's Steve? He might be on security. Steve and I have the same philosophy about snakes. I don't ask for IDs. I just shoot them. Don't, it's a good snake. It's a dead snake. And a dead snake is a good snake. I don't ask for ID. If it slithers and in the yard, it dies. Pow. It's a good snake. Shouldn't have been in the yard. But if you were brave enough to pick up a snake, do you grab it by the tail to where it can turn around and bite you upon the hand? You grab it from right behind the head where you have the greatest amount of control over the things that go. Notice how God has Moses pick up the snake. Moses, pick it up from the tail. And he does it. And madly enough, he snaps it and that snake becomes a stick again. And you figure Moses is going to say, man, got a sign from the Lord, got leprosy on my hand, no leprosy on my hand, no leprosy on my hand. Great. God, I'm going to execute. And notice what the Lord does. They will not, I don't need to do that. I got glasses now that I can do that with. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. And if they do not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile, pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood upon the dry ground. I would rather the water from wine part here, Hey, I got a new party favor for you. I'll pull this out and it becomes wine. Because you're not going to be drinking blood. If they will not believe these two signs, here's a third sign. Now, here's an interesting thing about the third sign. I kind of like how a lot of scholars have approached this. The snake, especially a venomous snake that you just plop down in a room full of people, has a personal protection need that immediately arises. People are not going to sit around and play with it unless, of course, they're a few bricks off. So that snake represents, for some, the aspect of imminent personal danger. Leprosy on the hand. Were lepers allowed to stay within the community in which they lived in? Immediate exile. Finally, you had the blood coming out of the Nile. What in the first part of the book of Exodus was the Nile used for by the Egyptians? It was the place where they threw children in. And they go back to when Cain slays Abel. And when Cain slays Abel and plays dumb, and God says, your brother's blood is crying from where? The ground. He didn't say grab water from a creek, from a water basin. Go to the place where the kids went in, were eaten by crocodiles, were drowned, were left to be exposed. Even Moses, where you went in and were found. And you take that out and you pour that out. And it should remind, and this is where scholars go with it, and I kind of like where they go, it should remind the parents of the blood of the innocent children they spilled by throwing them into the Nile. Now, that's a big argument for silence, but I think that's one of the reasons why it begins there with the first plague. You take that and use it as a reminder of the blood that you have spilled from the land. Moses, they won't believe the fact that you have tossed down something that will threaten their very lives and pick it up and it doesn't bite you. And if they won't believe you putting your hand in your vest and doing something that gets you immediately exiled from the community, then I want you to remind them of the blood that they have spilt by pouring that water upon the ground. Well, those are three wonderful signs. Wondrous signs. Fearfully wondrous signs. And Moses' response is not, here am I, send me. Moses' response is another excuse. Sign after sign after sign after sign after sign. This is now the fourth one. Because remember, the first and the biggest is he's talking to a bush that's on fire that talks back. We have, all of us, a ministry God has called us to fulfill. For some of you, it is to be the best you in the job that you are currently working, that you possibly can be, for the glorification of the kingdom and to expand the Word of God by telling folks about the love of Jesus Christ. For some of you, it's to be involved within certain ministries within the church here or within not paramilitary, but I screwed that one up. Para-church organizations like the Gideons and some other programs that you get involved with and begin to take the gospel message outside the walls of the church. For some of us to volunteer and be actively involved in the things of the church, whether committees or Sunday school or Awana or upwards. You do not want me teaching those kindergartners basketball again. To say my spring is wound tight is kind of loose. But they learn basketball. There are ministries that are prevalent and need all over this organization. Some of you have a call to be a professional minister. Within all that calling, there's rationalization. There's conversation with yourself that, no, this isn't really my call. Remember, I'm an introvert. I also have a learning disability. I don't read well. I have dyslexia. I don't read well. Words move around on the page. If you haven't noticed by my reading is a labor for me. It is not enjoyable. I know people that say reading is fun. I look at them and I think they're nuts. Reading is a labor for me. I read, but I don't read out of joy. I read out of necessity. But that's the requirement of the task that God has put before me. I could rationalize being a minister by saying, well, I don't read well, God. Put that in your hat and smoke it. You got the wrong guy. I'm an introvert. You clearly don't know who you're talking to. God could come and give me wondrous signs as He's given me multiple people, and then I make foolish statements like, well, when God fires me from the army, I'll go and do something else. Oh, that's what it takes. See, it's not simply a call in your life, well, the only calling is into professional ministry. No. Fewer should actually take that call, that supposed calling on, if it's actually a real calling. But I can tell you there is no calling to be a pew potato. You say, well, I'm older. Moses is 80 when this happens. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. There is no calling that I have ever found in this text, no matter how many miracles I look for and rationalizations, to be a pew potato. There is always ministry that can be done. There's always things that can be prayed for. Whether that's all you have the ability to do is pray. But we rationalize it away. Well, I'm older. Well, I'm too young. I'm just a kid. I'm a cut-up. I'm a prankster. And me. It's a wondrous thing to know that God can use a guy that doesn't speak well, who's a murderer, who's 80 years old, to deliver a nation. It's wondrous to know that God can take a guy who can't read well and utilize him for the glory of the kingdom. It's wondrous to know that God can take someone of middle age and give them a new ministry in which they can be involved in. It's wondrous that God can take a person like young Timothy, who's young, and send him to be a preacher. How do do we rationalize away those wondrous signs? Because that's what Moses is saying. They're not going to believe me. Well, they're not going to believe you. Well, here's a wonderful sign. I've already told you I was going to be with you. But now, watch, pow. That would really freak me out. If I got a walking stick, it's really nice. If I threw it on the floor and it became a snake, there'd be a hole in the carpet and a dead stick. And then the cops show up and it'd be very awkward. By the way, I shot my first turkey the other day. You should have seen the look of the people on the frozen food aisle.
I saw that coming.
You did, didn't you? I used that a week ago. I need Eric. He needs to be up here. Quiet you. It would really weird me out if I did this. I mean, really, I'm taking some danger here. And it was white. I think that I would stop making excuses. But then again, I also know my very nature. I think I would really be weirded out, and I'm not going to do this because it's carpet, if I took this and this didn't come out of the Nile, but I started pouring it on the stage, and it was blood. I think I would stop making excuses, but then again, I know my nature. I know how to rationalize those things away. Someone must have put a ketchup packet in there and it burst when it opened. I had a jelly donut in here and it exploded, which is a possibility, and that's how my hand turned white. Clearly, I snapped my cane, and it really wasn't a cane. It was actually a coiled snake that I snapped straight, and when I laid it down, it actually went back to what it was. Or I'm hallucinating, and none of you are in this room with me. But notice at every turn, God doesn't look at Moses and go, "You're right. You're off the hook. You're right. You're off the hook." Folks, I can make excuses till the cows come home. The calling God places upon my life is the calling God has placed upon my life. Running from it is just going to delay the inevitability. The calling God has placed upon your life is an inevitability. You running from it is just delaying the end result. You say, "Well, I don't think so. Look at Jonah. I'm going to sail in the opposite direction." Well, that's cute. How'd that work for him? I don't know about you, but I don't need to be swallowed by a fish to figure out I made a bad decision. What is your understanding of the calling of God upon your life? How long have you been running from your understanding of what God has for you? And it's not age specific. When I went to Bible college, I went to school with an 82-year-old man who believed God had called him to be a minister. He died at 90 after pastoring for 4 years. God called him to be a minister for 4 years. How do we rationalize away God's calling upon our life? What excuses do we use to not follow Him? Even when it comes to our own personal salvation, there are many here in this room that have been wrestling with that own understanding of personal salvation. That a loving God would send His Son into the world to redeem you back to Him and then indwell you with the third person of the triune God. And you will wrestle against that and say, religion is the opiate of the masses. There is no God. Yet there's a nagging, compelling urge within you to have a knowledge of who this God is. If you're here today, my microphone will be turned off. It'll be me and you discussing the wondrous gift of salvation that comes from our Lord Jesus Christ. I mean, you're here today that have regular full-time jobs, and the calling God has upon your life is to be of great service to the church as a volunteer in many ministries, or in small ministries, or for a very short period of time. And yet you find a way to rationalize it away. This morning, as the praise band comes to lead us, take the opportunity. If you've been feeling that calling upon your life, sit and then begin to have an honest conversation with the Lord, not one of excuse, but one of submission. As the praise band leads us, if you'll stand.